it was traumatic, but there's also a lot of beauty in it. So before I tell the story, whenever I first started thinking about divine guidance, I always thought it just had to do with meeting people. Like it was, like whenever you meet somebody and you have that instant connection, but that's not exactly it. For me, it's whenever I hear that voice and I pay attention, that small little voice that tells me exactly what to do. So what had happened is my father had just recently passed away, and I was driving from Texas to Missouri to try to make arrangements while I was driving. My son was doing all the texting for me, and I was making arrangements as I'm driving and crying, like just releasing. Um, but we got to Missouri, had our meeting, and my family, of course, we were all struggling. I'm the next to oldest of 7 kids. And we were just trying to make plans, like trying to get everything in order. And the night before the visitation, the funeral director had called me and said that their minister had canceled. He got very sick and he couldn't perform the service. So I don't know anybody down there. So I was like, okay, well, do you have a backup? And he said, well, we do, but he's out on vacation out of state. And I'm like, okay. So I said, well, do you have anybody else in your back pocket? And he said, I can try to make some phone calls, but if you have anybody, that would be great. So I called around to everybody in my family. I called some of my dad's friends, and nobody was really taking the bait. So I said a little prayer, and I got this voice that said that I needed to do it. So I am not a public speaker. I get very nervous in front of big groups of people. So I just decided to start jotting down my thoughts of things that I wanted to say. So I did. I just started jotting it down, and it was very unorganized, but I got the words on the paper, and it all came straight from my heart. But before I started doing it, I just said a prayer, and I was like, please help give me the right answers, the right words, the right message that I need to portray to honor my father. And the day of the funeral, I actually sat down and typed up my speech, and I didn't even have a printer. So I had to have the director print it out. And I got up there, and it was almost like an outer body experience, because I got up there and I just said what needed to be said. And it was, even though it was a sad moment, it was the most fun I've ever had at a funeral in my life. It was absolutely representing my dad, and every single word that was on that paper was so perfect. And every everyone was like so supportive, but like I had support from my friends, from my family, from everyone. But it was the voice that was the divine guidance, because I couldn't have done it without that.
Okay, let's clarify it. When you say the voice, did it really sound? I had it in my life as a clarion. I could describe it as a clarion voice. Or it was a thought, maybe bursted into your space, or it just knowing. What type of, just for specifics of it?
I always get a whisper, and it may sound strange to someone, but it's the sweetest whisper that I hear, and that's whenever I know it's the right thing. Because it's, to me, whenever someone whispers, it's so kind and so loving, and it's not screaming at me. It's not like bells and whistles. I'm already dramatic enough. I don't need my signs to be dramatic. I need it to be calm, to keep me calm. And it works perfectly. So whenever I heard that whisper, I was like, this is exactly where I need to be, and exactly what I need to do for my family and for my dad.
And when that whisper came, what did it say?
It just said, you need to write. You need to write. So I
Teaching
started.
points here. Teaching points here. First is, this is the difference between the ego-based sign or ego-based sound or voice, and the whisper and the inner voice. The difference is you perfectly described. The ego-based would be obnoxious. Ego speaks to us obnoxiously in a loud manner. I have also, well, obviously, I have experience. We all experienced it loud, and it will be just so forceful. And yeah,
Exactly.
we can hear it clearly, and we got used to following it. On the other side, the whisper will be non-assuming. It's not attached if you continue doing it or not, or if you do it or not, but it will be persistent in a
Right.
very small, subtle, beautiful way,
Yes.
comforting way. So that's the difference.
It was pure love is the best way that I can describe it. So whenever I heard it, it was the most loving message, just saying help, like help, you need to do this. And I didn't even second guess it one time. I was just like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and I did.
And because you followed divine guidance voice, everything was in the divine guidance flow, right? I call it green light flow. Could
Absolutely.
you give us an example of green light flow, how you experienced it?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up because I was going to say that earlier about the green lights, because that's one of my favorite things. So as I was right whenever I got the call, I was literally still driving. I had to pick my daughter up at the airport, and I was driving. Well, I had to go through all these little tiny towns where because it's rural Missouri, and there's like one stoplight in each one of them, and the speed limit's about 30. It's very, you have to go very slow. Every single town I went through, and I'm talking to the gentleman on the phone, every single light I got was green. And that's how I know that exactly what was happening was the divine plan of what needed to happen, and everything was falling into place exactly the way it was supposed to.
It was effortless. You
Yeah,
didn't need to struggle. You didn't need to fight. You didn't need to push over mountains, overcome mountains, climb mountains, because everything was guided, supported, and everything was happening. And
exactly.
divine setup was as such setup that you it wasn't just because the minister disappeared or the second one disappeared, right? It was experience for you because you needed to do it.
Correct. Yes. It's very beautiful whenever you look at that. And in any situation, there can be bad and there can be good, and it's our responsibility to find the good. And that's where our signs come in, because if you're really looking for them and paying attention to them, they're letting you know that you're exactly on the right path that you're supposed to be on.
Doing the right thing at the right
Yes.
time.
Yes.
Mhm.
There were signs everywhere, and honestly, like, a lot of them were in the moment that I might not even necessarily remember right now, but it's exactly what I needed. But just the people coming, and even the songs that we played, they were not traditional funeral songs. We did silly songs because it represented my dad so perfectly. And it literally did not feel like a funeral. It felt like a funeral. And that's what I used to kept saying, that,
Celebration.
excuse me.
Celebration.
Yeah, yes, it absolutely was. And that's all part of living. Like, we all die, and it's part of it. And yes, it's sad, but it was a great example to set for all of my family, my nieces and my nephews and my kids, for them to see that it doesn't necessarily have to be so hard and so sad. You can find the light in every single thing. And even the songs that we played, like, they were silly, they were fun, and the messages that came after, the people who came to speak to us, and it was just very, very beautiful.
Do you have some kinds of sounds there? Is it a cat? I hope it's your cat.
So sorry, they are doing weed eating right outside my window.
Oh, I hoped it's your cat. I wanted to see the kitty.
No, he actually lives in San Diego with Gabby now,
Oh,
because otherwise he would be right here in front of
right,
us.
right, right. That's why I said, oh, maybe the cat is walking around, so he could
Maybe
give us
he's
a
here.
sign.
Maybe he's here in spirit. It's funny. I was thinking he was here earlier, even though he hasn't lived here for almost a year. But I was dragging a cord because it had fallen, so I was going down the stairs, and he would usually try to grab it.
Oh,
I mean, was a flood of signs. Like every corner that I was looking, and the people that I spoke to, some of the conversations that I had, it was it was unbelievable all the signs that were coming. And the green lights were everywhere. But even with my dad dying, signs still came even after he left. I realized that a lot of our our relationship is still going to continue even in his death. Like we're still going to
We don't
continue.
die, so of course it will continue.
Exactly. So even though here on earth we had our struggles in our relationship, we had great times, we had a great relationship, but we also had our struggles. But with his death, a lot of those struggles that I have been dealing with have died away with him. And I love him for that, because even in death, he's still showing me, oh, I just got goosebumps. He's still showing me how much he loves us and how much he cared for us in every aspect of life. And just the fact that he can still give us signs even in his death when he's not physically here, he's still here with us spiritually, he's still in my heart. Like it's very beautiful.
So, Steph, if you want still continue to be a muggle, if you were not on a spiritual journey home, as we call it, if you did not know about spiritual divine guidance science, and the funeral happened at the time of your mugglehood, would it be different from now?
Absolutely. It would have been awful. It would have been, number one, I would have never gotten up there. I We would have probably, all of us would have struggled to figure out what to do. Um
You wouldn't listen to that inner voice.
No, not at all. And we would have all been so devastated that we weren't in the moment. And I'm so grateful that I got to be in that moment and enjoy it. Even though it was one of the saddest days of my life, it was also one of the most beautiful. And as I'm talking, I just remember the night before we had went up to my mom's grave, because she had already passed as well, and we were burying them right beside each other. But we took flowers up to her, and it was so neat because my family never prayed. We just never did. And when we got up there, we cleaned it off and put the flowers down. And my brother asked me to say a prayer, which was so neat because like we don't do that. But he turned to me and he said, well, will you say a prayer? And he would be the last person who would ever ask. So I did, and we left. It was a great time. But the next day, when we got back to the gravesite with my dad's body, as the funeral director was saying his prayer, butterflies came and sat on my dad's flowers on top of his casket. So that is so beautiful because it was showing that this life, we are all transforming, not just me, but my whole family. My whole family is growing, and we're all changing in different ways. And it's so beautiful to watch. I have now since had conversations with one of my baby sisters who is just barely starting to get there. And in the past, she was a muggle. She was so negative, and to see the light shining through her, and she was the one who noticed the butterflies the first, which is absolutely, it's just breathtaking to me. And it's a little overwhelming. Like it's beautiful.